Hello, guys. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. We are here live on Deprogrammed with a live That Christian panel. And for those of you who are watching live, it's good to be back. We haven't done one of these in a month and a half or so. And it's really nice to be back and to see some familiar faces in the chat and also to see my friends here. We've got, let's start with Brahma Bull. How are you, Mr. Brahma?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you guys.
We both got new cameras.
We did. I haven't set mine up though yet. Are you using yours?
Yeah. Well, actually, it just changed to another one.
Oh,
But yeah.
We should use them.
Not the one I usually use.
We should use them. Well, we've also got Michelle from Force of Light here. Hello, Michelle.
Hello. Good to be back after our little break.
Yeah, it is. I'm so excited every time I get to see you guys. And then we have returning guests. I'm sorry, I talked over you.
That's okay. I was just saying same.
Same. Returning guest, Dale Richardson.
Yes.
Dale, how are you?
I'm good. Tired, but still good. Never get enough sleep.
Dale, we brought you here because we're going to be discussing a Canadian tonight, and you're a Canadian. And we thought, before the show, I almost forgot you're Canadian, and then you said, what did you say? A boot, not a boot.
Against.
Yes, against.
Well, welcome back. Can you just tell people a little bit about you, since you're a guest, you're returning, like where can they find you online?
You can find me at DGS Richardson on X, Truth, and Getter, or on Facebook, or at the Karis Project on any Rumble. It's the Karis Project on pretty much every platform, like Rumble, X, cool. YouTube, all that stuff. Sounds
good. So yeah. I have some clips lined up. We can just jump right into it. You guys, how many people saw the James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson discussion?
I did not see any of it.
That much of it.
And Brahma, you haven't seen it yet, right?
No, I haven't.
This is going to be interesting then, because it's basically, I think, I might be overselling it, but I thought it was one of the best conversations I've heard in a few years. It was fascinating. I had to rewind it. I watched it twice, and it's one of the things that's so interesting to me is that you've got these two guys who are presumably still atheists, who are kind of using scripture. They're using the Bible as a lens through which to better understand human behavior and things like resentment and things that fuel bad ideology. And so I wanted to show you guys a couple of clips. They talk about the Cain and Abel story. They talk about the Garden of Eden. And so I thought it might be cool to get a Christian perspective on these stories and how they're referencing them and what Christians think about it. So here, without further ado, we'll start with this one. Now, they're talking a little bit about what many of us who are in the chat and those of us on the panel are probably familiar with woke left ideology. They're also talking a little bit about this sort of emerging set of beliefs that some are calling woke right. And then they're going to go into the Cain and Abel story here. So let's start here.
At any rate, what I'm watching is all these moms, I'm hearing from these moms already, who are telling me they aren't using this phrasing. This is my phrasing. That they by the grace of God, their daughters didn't get pulled into the trans destruction mania, and now they're having to watch their sons get lured into Nazism. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm so worked up about this woke right cult of transgression. I get it. You're a 15-year-old boy, maybe you're a 19-year-old boy, or 25-year-old, maybe you're a 35-year-old who hasn't grown up and got out of his parents' basement, and you think it's funny to post a mustache man meme or two here and there to rile up the libs and the normal people in the left and everybody else.
Plus, you're irritated that your identity has been targeted for 30 years.
Yeah, of course.
On racial grounds. Right.
Just like the way the Germans felt with the imposition of the Treaty of Versailles, if they saw it that way, whether we do or not, how the Germans felt about the French and broader Europe and the rest of their standing in the world.
Yeah.
And they were impoverished and they were broken down. It's the same powder keg, or maybe that's not the right word. It's more like a tank of propane, because you're going to pump it up and get it to spray fire when it comes out the other end, right? It's like,
well,
like
one of the things people can watch, for everybody who's watching and listening, is beware of anything that's motivated by resentment. You know, the mere fact that you have had difficulties that are somewhat arbitrary, first of all, doesn't distinguish you from the main run of the human race. But if the motivation stems out of resentment, the probability that something horrible has got a hold of your soul is extremely high.
So I go back to the first thing I said, right? What's woke, right? Well, it's woke people who act like, or who call themselves conservatives. It's woke people who call themselves conservatives or right wing, right? So there it is. You just said it. They are people who feel alienated and dispossessed from their heritage, victimized. They're filled with resentment, and they channel it through left-wing or right-wing causes.
Yeah. You know, that's the story of Cain, eh?
It is the story of
Cain's sacrifices are not rewarded. He invites the spirit of resentment in to occupy his soul, and becomes not only murderous, but the progenitor of genocide and the precursor to the flood, right? And the media, it's so interesting, James, because so Cain's sacrifices are rejected, and it's a little ambiguous as to why.
Yeah.
And then he goes to complain to God. And God says, he says, you think you're miserable because you're failing. It's like, you're not. There's lots of things you could do about failing. If you did well, you would be accepted, right? What you've done is you have allowed something terribly tempting that crouched on your doorstep to enter your house and have its way with you. And that's why you're bitter, resentful, and murderous. It has nothing to do with your failure. It's this additional variable, which is because the thing is, everyone, in a sense, this is true of heroes in mythology. Everyone starts out lowly. Everyone starts out dispossessed. Everyone starts out oppressed. Right? And there's angles of your identity that you can construe as oppressor-oppressed narrative with no problem. If you decide that you've been treated unfairly and now you have a right to resentment and revenge, then you're the monster that breeds genocide.
Yeah. And so what does Cain do? He's rejecting the system that he has to succeed in order to be rewarded. Yeah. He's rejecting. So there's a system out there.
Luciferian.
And so what does he do though? He goes and kills his brother. Yeah. He goes and murders
his successful brother.
His successful brother. He goes so it's exactly the same thing. A lot of these guys that are.
So we'll stop there. There's more, but what do you guys think about that?
First thing I notice is Peterson must have a cold, because that's the lowest his voice has ever sounded to me.
He wasn't feeling quite well. I was going to say the thing I noticed out of that, and everyone else feel free to go to, is just the discussion of resentment, because I think that is such a tool of, really, I mean, we're on the Christian panel, so let's just say of the devil, is getting resentment, because resentment, when it's not dealt with, it becomes kind of covetous. It's kind of covetous in its own way. You're resentful. Why? Because you're looking at others and saying, why did they have that and I don't? Why is my life where it is and why is my life here and theirs is there? And it is a very easy thing. We all have felt resentment in our life, but I believe it is such a masterful tool. And you definitely see that with what you would consider the woke left or the woke right. You look at it, whether it's what we would deem modern feminism, where there's deep levels of resentment towards men. And then now you see it on the right side with kind of the manosphere, that nonsense. You see deep levels of resentment towards women, and it's women that they're the reason we're oppressed, or it's the patriarchy, they're the reason we're oppressed. And you just see all this blame. The reason we see all this blame going around is because there's resentment, and it's easier to make yourself a victim than to evaluate why you are where you are and what you could do to maybe improve and get out of it.
Well, resentment is actually a consequence of sin. It's actually tied to it. When the devil became prideful, he started to resent Christ, and that's why this whole thing began because he was jealous of God and just was like, I'm lifting myself up better than you. And so that resentment came out of it. If you covet somebody, you're going to resent them because you're going to become jealous and you're going to become angry and bitter. And this is why we have to give those things over to God. The same thing, Cain didn't want to do what God said. It's straight up. Like, he didn't give the sacrifice. God wanted a lamb. He gave him the fruits of his field, and he said, I'm going to do it my way. Too bad for you. That was like legalism and lawlessness right there with what Cain did. And so this is what ultimately where resentment will lead you to murder eventually if it's not checked.
Yeah, and especially with the Cain and Abel situation, like you just described, it wasn't the resentment that came first. It was the pride that he could offer what he felt he should be offering, not what he was told to offer. And then when God put his favor elsewhere, that's when the resentment came in, and that's where the murder occurred. So, yeah, just piggybacking off of yours.
Yeah, because Cain actually, so sorry, just quickly, Cain gave that sacrifice and said that I'm going to do this and you're going to have to owe me the forgiveness. This is really the principle behind it. And it's like no different than legalism. Legalism and lawlessness are two sides of the same coin.
Well, sorry, keep going.
No, I just really like, I hadn't really started thinking about that. What you just said, legalism and lawlessness, two sides of the same coin. I had not really started thinking about that until the past year, maybe, like what that means. And I think you're right. But go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Now I'm like, what was I gonna say? Problems of ADHD. It'll come back to me. It'll come back. It was about resentment, but man, yeah, it's gone. So we'll circle back.
Is this the part of the temptation of man, is to sort of be bouncing between two extremes in so many different ways? Because like even in what you're saying about lawlessness and legalism, and then this little snippet where they talked about Cain and Abel was in a broader discussion about two different radical identitarian kind of belief systems. And they also talked about communism and fascism throughout history. And so it's sort of like, are we just doomed to continually bounce between two extremes as a people?
If we don't have
Oh, sorry, I remembered my thought.
Yeah. Okay,
if I don't get it out, I'm gonna forget it again.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, not that we every person deals with resentment, but I think resentment is specifically kind of big in our culture now because we have such a, whether they're actually technically a narcissist at all, like would be clinically called a narcissist. We have such a narcissistic society. So I think a narcissistic society, it lends itself to being resentful because it's all about me. It's all about I. And when life doesn't go a certain way, then they become resentful. Sorry, that's what I was going to say. I hope I didn't mess up your
Keeping
thought.
up with the Joneses.
Yeah, just kind of going back to what you were saying there, Keri, about going back and forth between legalism and lawlessness. That's the inevitable result if you don't have God, right? Because God is the only one that can help you to navigate it, because legalism and lawlessness all cut God out of the picture, and you have to find your own way. And that's the commonality between the two. And so if you don't walk with God, you're never going to find your way. This is why one of the reasons why Benjamin Franklin said it's a republic if you can keep it. You can't have a republic unless people voluntarily humble themselves before God, because that's the only way you're going to properly be able to disseminate rights, because you'll waver between going one way or the other and supply tyranny in order to keep people in check.
Do you know what it requires? Oh, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think you can look at a few different places in the Bible, Keri, where yes, it is the unnatural fallen world's order is that we do bounce back between different extremes. So you can look at, the Israelites, when they had judges, they begged for a king. God told him, not a great idea, but okay. Give
Yeah.
him a king. Everything goes bad. Then you bounce back and forth. The Tower of Babel. I mean, I think I know where these guys are going with this talk is some of the tribalism stuff that's been going on, or even we can with like the latest give, send, go stuff if we choose to. But even the Tower of Babel, I mean, the natural order was everybody spoke the same language and everybody was coming together. And that was leading to pride on humanity's side again. So everybody got scattered and all the different languages, to all the corners of the earth. So, I mean, we went from order to disorder. That's a consequence of the fallen world.
Well,
Actually,
Yes.
okay.
No,
you
go
want me to
ahead.
go? You want to go?
yeah,
Okay, I
don't
was
lose
gonna
your
say-
thought.
We know how it happens with me, but what I was going to say is I think the way, if I'm giving you my thoughts of, because as Brahma said, I think it's true, and as he was saying too, I believe it's true how we love to bounce back and forth, and you even see this in the way people depict God. One person will deem God as this God that is always smiting people from heaven. He's always angry. He's always judgmental. He's not very merciful. And then the other person, the lawless side, makes it to where nothing bothers God ever. And, the bottom line is God is both equally a just God that does have judgment in it, but also equally loving. He's all. We are the ones that have a hard time finding middle ground. But what I was going to say is I believe as Christians, we can do our best to live in between lawlessness and legalism. And I believe the only way to do that is truly by walking in God's love, grace, and mercy. Because only as we truly understand God's love, grace, and mercy can we stay in the lanes of not going to those two extremes.
On the narrow path.
Yes, because God's grace, love, and mercy, if we love God, we're not going to want to just live a lawless life. We want to obey the Lord. We want to follow the Lord. God's grace and mercy keep us from going to being too legalistic, too harsh, too judgmental, and love, towards people. And when we walk in God's grace, love, and mercy, we ultimately get to how God created Adam and Eve, which was liberty. There's freedom in walking in grace, God's love, grace, and mercy.
Yes, and that's true. I kind of want to touch on what you had said there previously, Rob, about the Tower of Babel. Yep. God cursed them by separating the languages, but he also blessed them because they were united in rebellion against God. So when he fractured the languages, it gave him time to send the promised seed, which was Jesus. But then you go and read the prayer of Jesus in John 17, and you realize that God is going to bring them back together for his purposes at the end. And when you're looking at all of this tribalism and so forth to do these divisive tactics, whether it be race, religion, like political ideology, and all of these things, is the devil trying to fracture what God is trying to do. Because Jesus said that you're going to be one with me, like me and my Father are one. Why? So that the world would believe that I was sent. He's going to do something in the weakest set of human beings, and he is going to show his power and his glory of who he is. And that's what the devil is trying to frustrate.
Right. But if it was, I agree on everything, but as a curse, it does create the mentality of tribalism amongst humanity until such time that we are all brought together in the body of Christ.
Yes.
And so it's kind of one of those things that's just deeply embedded in humanity because it's a fallen world. So yeah, I agree with everything you said about the coming together. Yeah.
Just why Jesus is the cure. Right?
Yes. And yes, Dale. And I've become one of those people. I never thought I'd be that person. It's like, Jesus is the answer. I'm laughing because back before I was a Christian, it was like, I didn't, when I heard people say that, I thought it was a cliche. I didn't realize that they were sincere. And I really do find myself becoming that person where it's hard for me to if I'm speaking with a non-believer, like somebody asked me, what's the, in my ex comments a couple days ago, what's the solution then? If it's not woke left and it's not woke right, it's not this, what people are calling woke right, this sort of white supremacy and this kind of sexism, I guess you could say, that Andrew Tate endorses, about sort of a reflection of feminism, if you will. And they're like, well, if it's not that, then what's the answer? And it's just like Christ. Like Christ is the answer. And at least I can say that with you guys and with most of this audience who watches, and what I mean. But I know to other people it sounds trite,
Well, I mean, after you spend a lifetime of running into a brick wall, you say, okay, God, all right, I'm tired of this. I'm sore. Can you help me out here? And then you realize then he starts taking you and you're like, wow, that makes so much more sense than what I was doing my whole life.
And what I was doing before. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Something you guys were saying about the Tower of Babel and the divisiveness and the enemy causing divisiveness, and this is sort of our curse and on in the earthly plane, right? I see so much of that on its face with what's happening right now and what these guys are discussing. This sort of let's divide one another up over racial lines. I've been seeing people say we need white solidarity and we need white racial consciousness and it's just, to me, it just seems like more of the same divisiveness, and the reasons why I thought black racial consciousness was unbiblical. It's like it's sort of the same, and also along gender lines, like this whole attempt to, I think, destroy the family and to, like Tate does, encourage men to create a lot of single moms and have babies with lots of different women. And this just, to me, seems to put men and women at odds. And so I do see a lot of that divisiveness now, and I think it's the work of the enemy.
It is. And one of the things they needed to accomplish this, and I was talking with Kent Hovind, he was the creationist guy from Alabama, that getting people to turn away from that was necessary to bring in Marxism, feminism, and all these other isms in there. And the fundamental premise, especially feminism, is that women can evolve to become like men. And this is really what the glass ceiling is. God created, when you look at creation, God created Adam and Eve. And when he married them, then he rested from his work of creation, because the image of God in mankind was complete. The two of them, both on one masculine, one feminine. God created Adam, and then he tested Adam out to show the masculine characteristics as him as a father, because God created, and he goes through a design process in a logical order of steps. And then he puts Adam into the garden to prepare it before he makes Eve. And then he gets Adam to name everything, just like how he was putting things out. And then he brings in Eve. And then together, it shows the differences between the roles. But without a woman being feminine and a man being masculine in that marriage union, you can't have the image of God. And to do away with that is how all these other isms came in. Right? That's where we had
the intersectionality.
Yes.
Let me ask you, since you mentioned the Garden of Eden, I do have a clip about that, because they talk about that as well. But before we move on, what do you guys think about the way in which they are interpreting the story of Cain and Abel and the truth of that story, like the meaning of that story, what the lesson, I guess you could say, that could be drawn from it? Because these guys, I have lately seen people saying that you should never this seems insane to me, but that an atheist is incapable of speaking truth. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that's true, actually. So, what do you think about? Do you think they are interpreting the story correctly? Are they twisting it? Are they missing something?
I'll put it this way. I think that they're interpreting it at their level of understanding, which is very, very spiritually immature. As they would develop, they would understand more, because there was things that he didn't understand about the sacrifice, because he said it wasn't very clear to him. But any Christian who has had any understanding understands that there was a lamb that he was supposed to sacrifice, because it's mentioned throughout the Bible and so forth, and that sort of thing, and that the plants, that the grain was not the sacrifice that God asked for. And so they're making strides. I'm not going to condemn them for it, right? Because anybody who's looking into the Bible, should you scold them for doing it? No.
No, and I think they probably, I mean, the way they're going to interpret it is not as literal, but as mythology. So they're going to slant it with a mythological view of it rather than taking it as, yeah, this was the story. So
Yes.
they put their own beliefs onto it as well, even if their beliefs are a lack of beliefs.
What I like about when I hear the first time I ever heard Peterson talk about the Cain and Abel story was several years ago when I first started leaving woke, and I was watching a lot of his videos, and I found an old video of his from the 80s or 90s. It was from before he became a public figure, and he was telling the story as this allegory for two different ways of being in the world: the resentful way of being or the grateful way of being. And so that really stuck with me, and I appreciate it because even if like they're not believers, but I kind of think they make it accessible for people who are not believers themselves yet, or who are questioning or maybe open their heart to it for the first time. And they kind of present it as like, hey, you don't even have to be a Christian to get this message from this, resentment is bad, gratitude is good. So that's one thing I like about hearing is I think it makes it accessible to people who are not yet believers, if that makes sense.
Well, have you watched any of Peterson and say Prager, all of them doing the study of Genesis, the study of Exodus that's on the Daily Wire? Because they have like in-depth studies of the early books of the Bible. And Peterson, and so, I mean, you've got Peterson, who I don't think is actually a Christian, although he's pretty well versed in quite a bit of the Bible. And then you've got Prager, who I believe is Jewish, and then a few others. That you've just got a whole bunch of professors and doctors that do a deep dive into it. It might be something you'd be interested in.
I would love to see that. I haven't seen it. I've seen some clips from back when he was first doing his live tour about the Bible. I saw some of those. So no, I haven't seen the two of them or those guys discussing.
He says that he's not a Christian, but he likes the idea of Christianity. And so I think that he's, kind of exploring the ideas, which is a good thing. Like, I mean, the fact that they're talking about it, like I tell people, whether you believe the Bible or not, the one thing I can say, it is the most accurate descriptor of human behavior. And everybody, just even on that fact alone, should pick it up and read it, because you'll see over the span of its history, human behavior has never changed. We do the same things now as they did then. Our technology might be different, but we still lie, cheat, steal, do good things. People do bad things. It's just, that is what it is. And we have a lot of lessons to learn. So
yeah,
it's good.
It reminds me a lot of C.S. Lewis, because I think he's such an excellent student of human behavior and being informed by God's word to better understand human beings. And he has a way with language and is able to speak it, I think, plainly. So it reminds me a little bit of C.S. Lewis.
Well, was it Lindsay last year on Twitter who was like, yeah, I'm an atheist, but I would prefer the moral guardrails of Christianity in a country over any secular.
He also, yes, that's a great point, Brahma. And, I think a lot of people are not aware of this, but I mention it to people who are not aware, who start arguing with me sometimes in my comments, is he did an interview last year or the year before. I think it was on Rogan, so maybe it was the year before. It was 2 years ago. He did an interview on Rogan where he said, in his opinion, a belief in God, and he specified, he said, the Christian God or the Jewish God. He basically said he thought Judaism and Christianity were antidotes to tyranny. And he excluded Islam from that, in his opinion. He was saying, and I remember Rogan was asking him why, and he was saying, well, because the believers that, you know, that they have something higher than the state. There's something that is more important to them, that's outside of themselves, that's bigger than them, and no tyrannical government is going to be able to do anything to, you know, force them to take the knee if they believe in a higher power than the state. I thought that was really interesting.
God-given rights. That's why we believe, or that's why we founded it on God-given rights rather than government-granted rights. Because if God gives you those rights, they can't be taken away by man. If the government gave them to you, they're not worth anything.
Well, they're not rights if the government gives them to you. They're privileges.
Yes.
Right. They can be taken away at any time.
Yes. Okay, I've got this other clip since you guys talked about the Garden of Eden. Okay. Now, at the beginning of this clip, you're going to see a section. I'll tell you right off the top. There's a little part in here where this whole conversation, to me, it's very stimulating because you can see both of their brains working in real time, and they're playing off each other, and they're making each other think. And so they're just kind of jumping from place to place. And there's, at the beginning of this, there's a little clip that a bunch of haters took and to make fun of James, where he's talking about Lucifer and being like the awakening, the dark enlightenment. And I do admit, for anybody in the chat who may be like, Keri, how can you not mention this? I'm going to say, I do think some of those memes that were made about this were funny. And I think James is able to laugh at himself. But I also think the underlying point he's making about Satan is true. So I'll just, with that caveat, you guys might laugh when you see this first part. Here we go. Wait.
And so they were swept up, the Hitler Youth were swept up to get into this. But it's the same program. There's a game. We used to be the masters of the game, but now we've been dispossessed from the game. They threw us from top to bottom. That was an intolerable experience. By the way, this is all the story of Lucifer.
Yes.
We've been cast to the bottom.
Yes.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to grab our rightful inheritance, and we're going to build the structure that returns us to it. P.S. The organizational structure is the Furrer principle, so I'm at the top.
Okay, so I want to talk about this Lucifer idea. So Lucifer is the morning star, and he's the angel of the untrammeled intellect. That's how he's portrayed in Milton, right? And he's allied in some strange way with the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
If I might
Yes.
just interject, if he's the morning star, what do you do in the morning after the morning star rises? You wake up.
Right.
Woke.
Right. The spirit of enlightenment. Right. Okay, so
Or dark enlightenment, as it were.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, that's the question. What's the difference between genuine? What's the difference between what's genuine and what's false, let's say?
Yes.
So in the story of Genesis, God tells Adam and Eve that they can pretty much have free reign, except for one thing. They can't, as far as I can tell, what it means is they can't take the right to define the moral order to themselves. They have to abide by the moral order, that there's an intrinsic moral order that's grounded below nature, even grounded in the principle of being itself.
Sure.
They have to ally themselves with that. But Eve, interestingly, Eve is tempted by the serpent. Maybe her powers of discrimination are somewhat lacking. Maybe her proclivity to empathy clouds her. And maybe it's a form of feminine pride. In any case, the serpent tempts her, telling her that if she ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that she would become like God, which is the one thing God forbade, right? So the idea seems to be something like, the more radical the revolutionary precept, the more likely something Luciferian is behind it. So it's a serpent in the garden, so it's clearly something poisonous, but then it gets weirdly associated with the idea of Lucifer, right? Which is a very strange leap. The leap is something like, what's the most poisonous of all possible serpents, right? So then it becomes a meta principle. And it looks to me like it's something like the drive to power. And that fits well with the notion that, well, Marx would be on top of the communists and Hitler would be on top of the Nazis and Mussolini would be top of the Italian fascists.
Yeah.
So if the belief system is pressed into the service of the hierarchical status of its originators, then there tends to be something profoundly Luciferian behind it. Yes?
Yes. So now we're talking at a very abstract, deep, whether metaphysical is, I think metaphysical is the right word, level for what represents woke. This isn't going to be recognizable to your average Joe on the street who's dealing with, a pride parade and saying, well, that's woke. I understand woke. But
yeah, and they are called pride parades.
They are called pride parades.
And the cardinal sin of Lucifer is pride. Right.
It does fit
desire to replace God, to replace the fundamental moral order. So I figured something else out too recently. So imagine that you could found a society on power, because you can, at least for a short period of time. And imagine that you could organize a group of people hedonistically as well. So that would be the real dark side of populism, right? We'll just have the government give people, it's like Pleasure Island in the Pinocchio video, right? Bread and circuses. You can get away with that for a while. Power, hedonism. You can abandon everything and sink into a pit of nihilism. That's not very effective psychologically or socially. But then that begs the question that the postmodernists wrecked their ship on, I would say. Is there a unifying principle, a high order unifying principle? That's the meta-narrative idea, right? Because the cardinal proclamation of postmodernism is that there's no pinnacle meta-narrative. There's no upper union. Yeah. But I think that's wrong. I think that the principle of voluntary self-sacrifice is foundational. And I think that's the narrative that runs through the biblical corpus.
Right? You've given very, very eloquent speeches on that.
Yeah. Well, and so then we would have a dynamic where because we're trying to figure out how to identify the Luciferian players, let's say. Exactly. That seems reasonable, right? So they're in love with the creations of their own intellect, but that intellect is not serving the principle of voluntary self-sacrifice. It's serving the principle of power.
Right.
You remember in the gospel account, when Christ is in the desert, the third temptation that Satan lays before him is the temptation of power.
That's right.
Right.
Everything that you see before you.
Yes.
Matthew 4.
If you follow me.
That's right.
Right. So that seemed, okay, so you don't have any problem with the underlying dynamic of that.
No, not at all. No, not at all. And I see, a fruitful discussion because, this is, of course, very high order thinking and expressing, but the experience for people on the ground is exactly what we were mentioning earlier. It's those traits of the dark tetrad, like Machiavellianism and all of this. So they're going to experience, what does that look like in everyday experience? The swarms on social media, the cancel culture, the struggle session, this kind of stuff, the lying and the manipulation,
the cries of victimization,
the gaslighting, and is the, it's called sometimes DARVO, deny, attack, reverse the roles of victim and offender. When you catch a psychopath out, they do it's an acronym DARVO. They deny that
there's a number of people operating like that
that's right.
at the moment.
It's everywhere. And so these are the experiences. So the expression that I could give to tie people, just to bring woke right back to the conversation, is we're familiar now with the machinations of woke left, right? And what I would say is, well, what's woke right is same energy, different direction. You have all of those same exact, whether it's Luciferian at the high level, whether it's struggle sessions, Machiavellianism.
Well, we've got a hierarchy there. It's Luciferian at the core. Then we've got the cluster B dark tetrad traits. Then there's the mechanisms that you described, right? So that's
Okay, we'll stop there. Do you guys want to see the whole thing yet? This to me is like my favorite kind of conversation.
I'm having to be in deep focus because of the talking.
I know. I watched it twice. I watched it with my husband also because I was like, and then we were pausing and talking about it. So there's a lot there, and let's start before we get into the Luciferian. What he's talking about is like this Luciferian way of acting in the world, which is sort of, I think they're loosely describing it as worshiping power at all costs and putting power like at the top and being in love with your own creation. And then they try and tie that to what is described as in the world, the secular world, as like cluster B traits like psychopathy and stuff like that. So they're talking about this Luciferian mode of being. But before they talk about that, they talk about the Garden of Eden. And I thought they might have missed a very important point there. I wanted to think what did you guys think about the way he described the Garden of Eden story?
Well, I mean, he did it pretty good for like his understanding. There were some things obviously that were overlooked, and one of the things is that the snake is the serpent, right? Like, I mean, the devil is the serpent. It's not just a regular serpent. Serpents they didn't talk, and so forth. And Eve was not standing there with Adam. She wasn't. Adam would have had to have murder in his heart to kill his wife, to stand there and watch the devil do that. If he was present, he wasn't. There was no way that Adam was there. And because God told Adam to not touch the tree, if you go back and read it, and then Adam told Eve. So he was responsible for telling her. That lets us know that God had set the man as being the one who was the protector, even in the perfect world. So the devil exploited her that way. And this is like, if you watch what Adam and Eve did in order to fall, because after Eve sinned, she brought it to Adam. Adam threw his life away because of his wife. And you watch women, they're weak to words, and men are weak to women.
Hey, I'm kidding.
It's true. It's true.
There are those verses in Timothy about kind of the con artists who can tempt women with their words. Like, what is that verse I'm thinking of? Silly women, I think it calls them, who can
Yes, the smooth talker.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think you're right about that. I didn't even think about that about him. Because he tempted Eve when Adam wasn't there, right?
Yes, there's no way that he would have been there. Adam would have reacted very differently. He would have, his first thought would have been to protect his wife, because he threw away all of his posterity to save his wife. Sorry, go ahead.
You're assuming that we don't know what Adam would do because Adam wasn't there. I'm just trained. We do not add to the text. We don't know that.
No. The reason why is the way that God laid things out, and Adam was in a perfect state. Adam didn't sin until he ate the fruit. God created Adam to be like himself and to create the circumstances for the success of his wife. This is what he laid out in his actions when he created Adam and then got Adam to do these things. We can sit down and say that unless Adam sinned beforehand and stood there and let Eve fall, he wasn't there. He wouldn't have done that. We knew that he sinned when he ate the fruit. So
but you are saying,
have been there.
Should we bring up the text?
He could. No,
I'm not saying to prove like, oh, you're right.
Yes,
but just so we start there and then see what you guys are disagreeing about.
Because it doesn't specifically say, it just talks about Eve. It doesn't say where Adam was.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm trained never add to the text. If it doesn't exactly say it, can't make the assumption 100%.
Well, I mean, it's implied in the actions is what I'm saying.
Well, okay.
But I mean, we also know from the Bible she just hands it over and he just eats it.
Yeah, we know that. So this part, let me just read this. So anybody because I haven't read this part in a while. So this is from Genesis. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Okay, should I stop there?
Then, as the joke says, Keri, and the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on, so he could have blamed
it. Yes. The reason when you talk about, when you look at way God, he's talking to God, because both of them at that point thought they were going to die, because God told Adam, if you eat that, you're going to die. So they're like, I'm going to die. What does Adam say? He blames God. He said, the woman you gave me. He didn't blame Eve. He created the circumstances and said, God, you gave me this faulty woman to make me fall. It's your fault. Then what does Eve say? The snake, he deceived me, right? But Adam was thinking on his toes when he thought he was going to die, trying to save not only just himself, but save his wife, because if it's God's fault, then they can live. He did exactly what the devil did, blamed the rebellion on God.
Well, I've got some disagreement also in the super chat, so I'm going to read this. John Thomas for $5. Thank you, John. Says, Dr. Jordan Cooper speaks of this. Adam was there. His first sin was not protecting his wife. So this seems like something people disagree about a lot. I didn't know there was this disagreement. My perspective on having read that is I can't know because it's not.
That's what I'm saying. I think either way, it's an assumption on the text that we don't fully 100% know.
No,
yeah, I mean, you could interpret it as that
either way.
Sin didn't exist until they actually ate from the fruit of the tree, because even Eve kind of smudges things a little and says that you can't touch it or you'll die, which was not the command. So I don't know if it's actually saying that. I mean, technically you could interpret it that yes, it was the sin of Adam to fail to protect, but was it a sin until they ate from the tree?
You see that if you have to look at it this way, God told Adam, and it doesn't say he told Eve. Eve learned this from Adam, because Eve wasn't created when God said, "If in the day that you eat of the tree, you will die." Adam was responsible for telling his wife. That's how she gained the knowledge, because she wasn't created yet. If you go back and read, I was just looking at this just a couple of days ago. So he was responsible for doing this. So if Adam allowed his wife to go and eat of the fruit in his presence, he would be responsible for killing his wife, because he should have said something, because God told him, not her. He was responsible, right? He was the one that was created first. He named Eve and so forth. God gave him that position as being the protector from the beginning and created the circumstances for the thriving of his family. This is why he was put in the garden, to prepare it. So Adam would have had to stand there and let his wife die and then go ahead and eat it. And if he did that, why would he eat the fruit? He would just walk away, because he would have been guilty. He didn't need to eat the fruit to sin, since he murdered his wife, right? That's the prevailing understanding behind that. This is why he couldn't be there, because so many things would have broken down, because he knew better, because he got that directly from God.
But then why does he eat of the fruit?
Because his wife is dying. He knows what his wife did, and he threw his life away for his wife, just like men do stupid things for their women.
I think that is adding way too much to the text, because at the end of the day, they both were made in the image of God, both have, which means liberty, the ability to choose. And there had to be something to choose from, hence the tree. Or if not, they're all just robots who don't really have choice because there's no option to rebel against God. And, yes, whether we want to argue if he's there or not, he very well is not there when the serpent comes. But when she says, "Hey, Adam, here, you want to eat this fruit with me?" He's like, "Sure." Like, and it's his own free will. I think there's too much assuming of intent on Adam here. Adam just sins, man. They both sin. They both decide to be like God.
To eat.
We have more commentary from the chat on this disagreement. This is Andrew Knapp for $5. Thank you, Andrew. Says 1 Timothy 2:13-14. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor.
Okay, yeah, does it make it any better that Adam wasn't deceived? He just willfully rebelled?
Because sin entered the world.
Hold on, that makes Eve almost more sympathetic. She was actually deceived. Adam was just freely joining in.
But that's why it said sin entered the world from Adam. It didn't say that Eve entered the world, because Adam made a deliberate choice to do that.
Adam was technically the one given the order. That's exactly
what I'm saying. That's that we're actually agreeing right there. That's what I'm saying. He deliberately chooses to sin.
Yes, but if he was present with his wife, they would have said that differently, because then he would have created the circumstances for his wife to fall by not protecting her. He would have, because he knew better.
I don't know. This is where I stand. This is usually me. I don't
know that it makes a difference.
I don't know if it makes a difference.
I don't know that it makes a difference.
I do want to
she got deceived. He actively chose to eat it.
The reason why the reason why I say this is that God gives us a little bit of understanding about himself, and like by our natures. Men by nature are designed to protect women. That would have been the same with Adam. Adam, in a perfect state, would have done anything to protect his wife. He made that choice because he loved his wife, to die with his wife. Why would he, if he wanted to kill her, which when he would have stood there and allowed her to eat of the fruit that he knew would have killed her, that means he wanted her to die. Why would you do that? That's beyond reason. That would be like me standing there and saying that I'm going to let my wife go and do something that's going to kill her, and then I'm just going to go and partake and kill myself after that. It's unreasonable.
I don't know that until sin came into the world that there was a knowledge of death, or there would have been any thought of protection, because from what?
But God said,
they are told if you eat, you'll surely die.
Yes, he was told that beforehand. So why would he do that?
Well,
sure, but it was also a spiritual death. I mean, it's ultimately a spiritual death, but it was a physical death came into the world.
Yes, but why would he do that to his wife at that point in time? This is the whole point. Like, it doesn't make sense if he's standing there just watching his wife dying and then saying, okay, well, I'm going to go now die too, right? Like,
well, you have given me more to think about with it, and I this might be the most contentious disagreement we've ever had. I'm kidding.
But here's my thing. Even in the protective thing, I get what you're trying to say there, but like she's like, hey, Adam, I got this fruit from this tree over there. You know, that tree that God told you, if we eat from, we're going to surely die.
The only one we haven't tried yet.
And Adam's like, sounds great, Eve. And they just start eating. You know, I don't know.
Well, remember what Adam said when God brought Eve to him. He was like, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she's of me. He had his second self. He couldn't imagine living without her. That's why he said those words. That's the bond between. This is why men will lay down their lives for their wives and their families. We're wired that way. It was the way from the beginning. And so when he saw the death coming on his wife, he would have laid down his life with her because he loved her. He couldn't imagine life without her. And that was the only reason why a man would do that. His desire would have been to protect her in a perfect world.
So we have a lot of...
Hold on. In a perfect world, though, they still could choose to rebel. And in a perfect world, I don't know that I can just assign Adam these great intentions of, oh, it's like Romeo and Juliet, and I'm just going to die with Juliet. I don't know. I think the point of the story is they both willfully reject God's
Well,
order.
they willfully rejected God's order, but the reasons why would be different. It'd be like I could put myself in that position. Now, if I was standing there with my wife and I knew that I was at the tree and she would eat from that tree, she would die. What would be my intention if I allowed her to eat that? It's not that hard to figure out. Like, I would want her to die. Why would I do that? Right?
Well,
Like,
that's
and
why. Why
I'm
didn't he take the fruit and just take it and say, boom, just frilling it right out of her hand? Here, Eve. No, we're not eating that. Stop.
because
No fruit.
he wouldn't have been there, because what reasonable man would have not stopped his wife from killing herself?
Well, but
Okay,
in this,
I am going to put can I put a
That-
pin in this argument? Just
Yeah,
because
yes.
we are getting a little bit off topic with this disagreement, and I think I've heard
That's fine.
just a little bit, but it
that-
is. You've
It's
given me a
fun.
lot to think about, and actually, push-ups I think has a point that both of you missed, which is none of this would have happened if Eve had stayed in the kitchen. Thank you, push-up. It's a joke. We have humor
Yes.
here.
He was
which-
getting fruit, so
She was getting fruit for the kitchen. There you go.
They were separated, and that was the big problem.
Yeah.
that
But
I agree.
I want to ask you more about the Garden of Eden story. But quickly, since I was reading some of these anyway, I just want to thank Brett. At the top of the show, Brett gave us a super chat, $5. Thank you, Brett. And he says, how's everyone? It looks like I will be able to make it to Michelle's birthday stream in a couple of weeks. Happy early birthday, Michelle. Michelle, when's your birthday stream?
Well, my birthday's on the 17th, so we'll do it the Monday after that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. And then Robert, one of our mods, is here. He gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much, Robert. And if you guys got one of those, you can thank Robert, or KB gifted 1 membership. Thank you, KB. And then Mark for $2. Thank you, Mark. Mark says, Adam's highest love is God, not Eve. Are we going to get back to the argument or no?
Well, I mean,
Why?
if he,
Yeah, I don't want to derail.
Yeah.
all I'll say is if he chose God, he would descend. Right?
He would
Yes.
ascend. That's true. We can all agree on that. Okay, so let me ask you this about the story of the Garden of Eden. One of the things that Peterson says is he sort of we can all agree that Eve ate the apple first. At least we can agree that she ate the fruit before
Yes.
and then she gave it out. Okay, we can all agree on that.
Yes.
One of the things that he hypothesizes is he sort of said in that clip, not really sure why she did this. Maybe she's more empathetic, as a female. Like, why would she? What are your thoughts on that? Maybe it'll take us right back to the same argument. But what are your thoughts on that? On why Eve was tempted by the serpent? And then second to that, I would say, I think they missed the chance to talk about resentment. They talked about resentment in the Cain and Abel story, but this story of the Garden of Eden, I think, is also can be understood through the lens of like God gives them this whole garden of yeses. This is the way my pastor has described it, and I'm going to butcher it, but you've got this whole garden of yes, and there's just one no. There's one guardrail. There's one, not this though, but all of this. And you could almost view it as this sort of human resentment and entitlement where the serpent's kind of like, but why can't you eat of that one? Why that? No, you can do what, you can do it. You can have that. He just doesn't want you to be like him. It sort of like stirs that resentment, entitlement. I can have that one. No. So what do you guys think about those things? Like, why was Eve, the woman, tempted first? And do you think that that you could get a message about resentment from that story as well?
Well, I think you get in it. I think you get in it. I mean, yeah, there can, I guess, be some resentment, but I mean, again, the word that is used here is deceived. And I mean, the first way he deceives her is basically, and it's something he uses to this day on all people, basically to he goes at her trust at God, because he's trying to get her to question what God said. And basically, you can't trust him because this is the reason he doesn't actually want you. So he's getting her to doubt God and to make her question that. But then there's something good attached to it. He makes it sound good because he comes as an angel of light. Because surely when you eat like that, you will be like God. Like there's a positive, because how would I define sanctification? Becoming like God, becoming like Jesus. That is actually holiness, becoming like God. You are actively becoming. So he makes it sound appealing, but yet it's also, again, getting to break down, well, maybe he's not truthful to you. Maybe this God you serve is holding back Eve. He's not being honest. So he's really tearing down, which, I mean, even if you're not a believer, that's what the devil does. He gets everyone to believe that up is down and down is up. And that's what he's doing there.
Yes, I agree. He sows seeds of doubt. He got her to distrust God in the way that he put his words. He was very subtle and definitely deceitful in doing that, and made it sound like, yes, God was hiding something. So if you do this, you'll get what God was keeping you in the dark about.
Yeah. You'll be like God, which, if there is no knowledge of good and evil, then you can't possibly know what you're missing out on. So even though that would not be a good thing to know of good and evil, because it would be better to live without that knowledge as God intended, it's still you'll be like God, you'll have the same power as him, so you'll be on his level. And that was the ultimate temptation there.
It's where you mix the truth.
So it's not really resentment as much as it is, I think, deception.
Yes.
I mean, you could call it resentment, in that she wanted to have the same power as God. But I don't know if I'd go resentment as much as either. It couldn't be much of anything at that point because there wasn't sin yet.
Yes, it was deceit. It was more deceit than anything.
Okay. What do you think about the later on in that clip, they start talking about Lucifer, and they're talking about power, and they mention Matthew 4, and they're talking about when Satan tempts Christ in the desert and sort of offers him everything, like, which to me is sort of a callback to that story a little bit.
Of course it is. What did she offer Eve when he said you'll be like God? Right?
Yeah.
Power that she thought she was going to gain.
Yeah. All that you see before you.
What I always love about that little tease right there is he's offering Jesus everything that he already, he's already all powerful, all authorities in his hands. But sure, devil, offer him this.
Yes.
Well, yeah, except that, until everything comes to fruition, the prince of the power of the air is still the ruler of this world. So yes, although it is ultimately God's to do with whatever he wants, Satan has been given dominion at the moment over the earth. So what I found interesting was that they seem to disagree that the serpent and Lucifer and Satan are the same being, when they do seem to look at that verse and then recognize that Satan is the ruler of the earth at the moment. So why would it be a different entity that would have been in the garden tempting for the actual fall?
They did.
And I've seen
that,
lots
right?
of theologists argue that one too, or well, not necessarily theologists, or not seminary trained theologists, but those who look at it amongst the lens of all religions, and kind of just like looking at the story. And there's a lot of people that seem to disagree on who Satan, the devil, the serpent, and Lucifer are. Because I think even does the Hebrew Bible say that it was Abaddon, or is that just something coming in from like angels and demons?
Well, when they come in when you look at even in Revelation chapter 12, it tells you the dragon, the serpent, the devil. Like, they just list all the names there, so
right,
that
all the different.
should be pretty clear for you.
I don't know the answer to that question, Brahma, but I looked it up. It says in the New Testament, Abaddon is the Hebrew name for Apollyon, the angel of the bottomless pit, who is also the king of a horde of locusts in Revelation 9:11. Now, I don't know if this is just what AI is telling me.
Right.
Google AI. So yeah, I'm not sure. That was that's an interesting point. I think maybe because they are not Christians. To me, I thought don't we all agree that the serpent is Satan? And that was I was like, oh wow, they view it as possibly two different entities.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely people who believe that they're two different entities, but I don't think it's the majority accepted view of that.
Yeah. I've got another super chat here. This one's from Randy. Hey, Randy, for $10. Randy says, as much as I like both Peterson and Lindsay, neither is Christian and both are human, so I do not take their thoughts as gospel. Smart and interesting men, yes. Holders of all truth, no.
Yeah, this is more a philosophical talk through the biblical lens than it is a theology.
Yes. And for the record, I don't think any human, believer or not, is a holder of all truth.
No, that's God.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would say in order to truly know or understand God, you do have to be a believer. Like I think an unsaved person can only go so far, and I would take that even I mean, the Bible talks about our basically we're dead in sin, and there is, when we are born again, our spiritual senses become awakened, and Paul even talks about how you can't know the things of God without the Spirit. And the Spirit, yes, is always there, but the Spirit doesn't come dwell in you and teach you until you are, in fact, a believer.
Well, yeah, Jesus tells you that when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he'll guide you into all truth. So you need the Holy Spirit to teach you. Like, you can read some stuff, but unless you ask for the Holy Spirit, it ain't gonna work the same way.
Yeah, I think I best heard this described. My pastor talked about once, like the difference between knowing about God, like knowing facts about God, versus knowing God. Like it's sort of like you know, I might know a lot of facts about Keanu Reeves, but I don't know Keanu Reeves. like I, or whoever, pick someone that's in the public view. But there is this kind of like, once you come to be a Christian, a knowing that is different than just like, I can rattle off these facts. It's an experience of God.
Well, when Paul says that I may know him in the fellowship of the suffering, the word know there literally is the same word Adam knew his wife. It is, it is depicting that level of intimacy of a knowing with God, that it's literally compared to, in our human terms, a sexual union, just in the sense of, because that's the most intimate union you can have on earth. And that is more, again, that's, figuratively, but that level of intimacy is the level of knowing that Paul refers there when he says that I may know him.
Yeah, it's actually, you're right. It's actually even deeper when you contemplate the way that the Christian marriage is supposed to be built on a foundation of mutual love and respect, with a foundation of God, so that when you do have that union on the way that God laid out, it will be to a much deeper level than even the average person would understand who wasn't a Christian. So it shows you a deep level that not even the average person could have. It's a higher level of that kind of understanding, of that intimacy.
A couple of people in the chat, just to follow up with some of the stuff we were talking about. Mr. Smith says, yes, Abaddon, the ruler of the bottomless pit. Justin Peterson says, in many works of art, the serpent is depicted as semi-human and not just a snake. And then Power Keg Greg, hey, what's up? Greg says Satan was in his cherubim form when he was in the garden. The serpent, the Hebrew word means necromancer. Is that? I haven't heard this before. He was in his cherubim form when he was in the garden.
That would be the angelic form, but
like that. Yeah.
I don't see any record of that.
Yeah, we definitely don't have that in the text.
Can we get into another argument? I like. Let's get a spicy Christian panel. We're just like,
hey, I like it. Do you understand that this is mild?
You were enjoying it. You can keep going.
I was enjoying it. I've not had one of these in a long time. It was exciting.
You were like, keep going. This is actually good practice for me, Michelle, because I have a pleaser nature where I'm like, hey, let's all get along here. It's so annoying. It's annoying. People don't like that, and I need to cut it out. So you can fight. Go ahead.
We're not fighting. I know.
I know. It's just it's my own like, oh my goodness, let's all smooth it over. But no, you're not. It's interesting. It's an interesting argument.
The one thing that I do note is that at the garden, Adam, he went for the woman first, and then the woman came to Adam. She was the youngest out of the two, even though it may be by a couple of hours. But that just shows the nature of the devil. The devil goes for the weakest one, the youngest one, the smallest one. And he could have went to Adam first, but he didn't. He went for Eve and then Adam. That just shows the predatory nature of the devil. He's just, it's filthy and disgusting.
Well, do you know that is actually an excellent point that I want to piggyback on. I'd have to go back and look. One of the early church fathers kind of made this point, and I think it's accurate. I mean, whether everyone agrees with it, whatever. But that God, yes, Adam and Eve were perfect in the way they were made, but perfect in the sense of, even the way a newborn baby can be perfect, but they have to grow. They're immature. And he believed that, Adam and Eve, yes, though perfectly made in the image of God, were still immature, not fully mature in the sense of needing to grow. And like you said, she's the younger one of the two and immature, and he goes to her.
Compared to the devil, that's the mindset, honestly, like a pedophile. They go for the weakest one. Honestly, the devil's disgusting.
Randy says the devil went after the weakest link.
Yeah, not necessarily the weakest one, but the most vulnerable.
Yes.
To whatever he was trying to accomplish.
Yes.
There's something interesting since you're mentioning the vulnerable part. At the beginning of that first clip, the Cain and Abel clip, they were talking about how women have more of a vulnerability to what they're calling woke left ideology. And which I think most of us on this panel and probably in the chat agree on roughly what that is. And then they were saying that young men have more of a vulnerability to what some are now calling woke right ideology, which a lot of people might just know as like what used to be called alt-right or neo-Nazi stuff, or, white supremacy kind of stuff. The far right, all of that. And it's weird. We almost have to define terms all the time now because the woke left has misused so many terms, and they call everyone far right and they call everyone Nazis. And so it's sort of, now when I talk about these things, I have to say like actual neo-Nazis. So they were saying that young men are more vulnerable to what they're calling the woke right. Do you guys think that's true? And if so, why might that be?
A little bit because of who's more vulnerable on the woke left. I think we can all agree, looking at almost every poll, that leftist women tend to be the ones that are sucked most into the woke left.
Yes.
They are the ones who will think with their feelings over facts far more often. Not every woman, just a good chunk of them. And I think here's where you get some of the resentment. I think some men have gotten very tired of being constantly the boogeyman to everybody on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that pushes them into a group where they seem to find their own acceptance.
Yes.
And as stupid as it may be, if you find a group that accepts you, sometimes it's just nice to be part of the group.
I think that, yes, and I think that the woke left is tailored more for women to be palatable to women, because
Yes.
there's far more emotional appeal, where women are more processing on emotion, and they have to, because they have to tend to a baby that doesn't speak.
It's part of the nurturing.
Exactly. And men are supposed to be the more logical ones to think about things during danger and the consequences and so forth. So they provide something of a solution, but it's still not a full solution, because it actually causes more damage, and they just use it to feed off each other. And the resentful men are bitter at the women.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say too, it's easy to see why the women go that way. I mean, the whole argument is the patriarchy's held you down. You could have power, they've courted women really hard, and women and minorities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, but how did they distort the patriarchy? They had to first pull men away from God, right? This is how they were able to start this whole idea with feminism. They had to go with the men first and start pulling them away from God, and they became tyrannical. And then they provided the solution, which was feminism, which then created a war in the home, right? Take God out of the equation, and there's always going to be fighting.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of the weak men, hard times, strong men, cyclical thing. We're just going through another cycle of it.
Yeah,
It-
and then
In the West,
and then on
weak
the,
men have created hard times.
yes, and then on the other side now, if you want to call it the woke right, whatever you want to call it, you have those. It's this. That's why I just keep saying it's the opposite side of modern feminism. You have that other group that's now beginning to court the men, the young men, and tell them things that itch their ears about themselves. And especially since the other side has been putting them down, this sounds lovely to them now. So it's just a mess.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, the like I actually, me and my daughter, we did a podcast talking about the dichotomy between feminism and that red pill kind of thing, and how they're here feeding off of each other, and then people who don't fit in between are all getting mowed down in the crossfire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they are
Right.
kind of mirror image on some things. Um,
Well, and the disappointing thing is some of the loudest voices on like the manosphere / red pill stuff are people who claim to be Christian. Because I haven't listened to a ton of them, but I mean, Andrew Wilson's on the Whatever Cast every single week talking to all those girls.
yeah.
So I don't know how manosphere he is, but a lot of his points are very much manosphere points. Some of them
They
are
are.
actually probably right. Like
Yes.
the fact that there is at least one right that women have that men don't in the US,
Yeah.
which is we can be
Not go to
drafted.
war.
Women don't
Yeah.
have skin in the game. If a woman can be elected or elect somebody who is willing to send every male into war, then a woman should have skin in the game. I do agree with some of those points to a degree. But a lot of just the sexual games that are discussed on those things, and body count, all that kind of stuff, it leans very far into the manosphere type stuff. And I'm not sure how much Andrew Wilson does that, but yeah,
Some of them. There seems to be
he's pretty rough on those shows.
Yeah, an emphasis on like women's fallen nature, which I agree with. It's not that I disagree with a lot of what they say about women and degeneracy and body count and all that stuff. It's just that then there's no, it's almost by like ignoring that men have a fallen nature as well, and a responsibility to live, if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, to walk the walk, to let God's love transform you and give you a new heart. And there's almost this sort of overemphasis placed on, you know, it's women's fault. Everything's women's fault. And I see that in feminism the other way.
That's what I'm saying. The other side of the coin. Everything's men's fault. Everything's women's fault.
My daughter actually went on the Whatever podcast.
You showed us that.
Forgot about that.
Yes, and when my daughter deferred to the protective male in her life, when she tried to defer to me and said, "This is something you need to discuss with my father," they tried to continue to push her into that situation to not do that, which demonstrated that they were not actually following what they were saying. Because if you're seeing a woman that's being respectful and deferring to the male, as you're saying that you should, why are you trying to make her not defer to the male and give you what you want? Right?
Because those men are as gross as the women that, I'm sorry.
Well, because both sides are fallen.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because when you look at the way, if you look at what the Bible talks about the patriarchy, it's not what you see today. And people really need to understand what it means, because you look at what Jesus does. And like when Paul even talks about husbands, submit to your wives, that word submit or subject yourself, that does not mean, it's like a military term, as you're submitting or agreeing to work with the military commander and cooperating. And when you think that we're in a spiritual war, and when you look at where they put the men to go out and get killed, they didn't send the women out. The women had a responsibility. So you're going to trust the man to go out and do all the hard stuff, like go to war and all those things, while you take care of the other stuff. And that's really kind of what it means. Not like you need to bend over. And it's like how Christ is taking care of the people, and everything is done voluntarily. And it's a symbiotic relationship where the woman takes certain responsibilities because the man's going to go out and deal with the hard stuff. And they're twisting it from the way that God designed it to be, because he wants it to be back like he did at the beginning, for that harmonious relationship to work. And that's not the way they're portraying it.
Hey, Cynthia Carter at 826 has a good point to Andrew Wilson. It's the next one above that. To Andrew Wilson on the women thing, the right to vote thing. Yeah.
Cynthia Carter says, if you have to have skin in the game war-wise, then men outside of the age of service or disabled should also lose the right to vote. So this dog don't hunt. Well, no, I may disagree on this, because hear me out.
We still lived under the threat of having
you
to
did
be
live
drafted
under the threat
for
of
war.
it. Yeah,
women never did.
And you never did, but you did live under that you did bear that responsibility, you know, if you were called at some point. And it's almost kind of like, I'm just giving the devil's advocate of what I think Andrew Wilson might say. It's almost like when people say, when you're trying to define woman with a leftist, and you explain, well, like very basically, like women can have children, and they're like, aha, but what about women who've had a hysterectomy? Yeah. And you're like, or women who've aged out of childbirth, and you're like, yeah, but at one point they could. Anyway, it is a good point.
I can end it for Andrew Wilson. I don't believe there should be a draft on the other side. So
boom.
Neither do I. But at the moment, that's the argument that's in place: is there is one right that's not equal.
Leftists do skip over that one a lot, and I didn't even think about that one until I think it might have been him in some debate bringing it up, and I had never even thought about it.
Well, and I've said for years, I don't care if it's a guy or a girl voting. I think it should be people who have skin in the game, as far as you must be paying actual taxes to have a vote. I'm tired of people voting who are just voting for Santa Claus.
Well, did you watch when they walked into college campuses and asked people about voting and the things that they voted for? I mean, are the reasons why they were voting for? I mean, watch it. Go on, watch when they go and talk to college students. about voting, and you're just like, maybe they really need to rethink how that's done, and being in families or whatever, getting to an age of being contributing something rather than drinking for 50% of the time while you're in school and can't think. Maybe they need to change that. Either you're working for a while, like you said, paying taxes and so forth before you start voting.
For the
I
longest
also
time,
feel
it was owning land.
Cynthia just made another good point.
Is it this one? Angry women hate
no,
men?
No, the one
it's
after that,
the
it's
last one.
at 30 after.
Okay, let me read this one first because I keep trying to read this one, Cynthia. I like this one too. Angry women hate men, angry men hate women, and under it all, both angry groups hate everyone, themselves included. They just project a lot to assuage that loathing, that self-hatred. Okay, let me find the other. You said it's under
At 30 after.
It's her
Just a
latest
time
one.
code.
this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
The men being shipped off are also some woman's son. Should mothers not have a say? This stuff always comes down to, quote, I don't like women. They shouldn't have this right. Let me pretend that this is why, end quote.
Actually, just kind
To
of,
me, it doesn't come down to that. To me, it comes down to I don't, like I said, I don't care if men or women both have the vote. I think there needs to be a very specific type of skin in the game. I think it should be taxes paid.
Taxes.
But there has always been an argument about selective service.
But the point I do think she's making a good point. Any mother has skin in the game if she has an 18-year-old son.
yes, but like just from like looking through the Bible, when the life and death decisions that were made, they were generally made by men. I don't see when it came down life and death that they gave it to women. I don't anywhere. And that's, I mean, that's really the issue, because men were the ones that God sent to war. I don't think women should be sent to war, period.
Yeah.
Well,
Typically,
except
military matters were men.
Yeah, except Barack would not go out unless Deborah went with him, and Deborah went into battle.
Yes, she did. But who instructed her? God directly did. And she said God told, yes. But she didn't, outside of that, lead by herself. It was because she
No,
wanted what God
I was
told
just making the point that there's that
Yes.
wrinkle.
Yes, but she didn't fight. She went with him, but she didn't fight.
No, but she went with him as like the leader.
Some people are also mentioning Judith, unless you're Judith. Judith?
Who's Judith?
I'm not sure. I thought this was something I don't know yet. Let me see. Judith. I'm still learning a lot, guys. Just bear with me about Christianity. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay.
We're all learning.
The book of Judith.
You mean Jude? We don't have a book of Judith.
Okay, it's in the Eastern Orthodox Christian Old Testament and Catholic. Oh, this is something Odin might have known.
Apocryphal.
Okay.
But excluded from the Hebrew canon. And it's assigned by Protestants to the Brahma, the Apocrypha. It tells of a Jewish widow, Judith, who uses her beauty and charm to kill an Assyrian general who has besieged her city. With this act, she saves nearby Jerusalem from total destruction. The surviving manuscripts of Greek translations appear to contain several historical anachronisms, which is why some Protestant scholars now consider the book ahistorical. Instead, the book is classified as a parable, a theological novel, or even the first historical novel. The Roman Catholic Church formally maintained the book's historicity, assigning its events to the reign of King Manasseh of Judah, and the names were later changed centuries later for an unknown reason.
I'll just add, yes, the guy that they were hunting, Sisera, I think his name was, the woman killed him and drove the thing into the temple. But when it came down, like, okay, it's like, look at me as my father, being a father, my daughter. I wouldn't want her to be sent out to war to die. No. I would rather go myself than send her out. And if I was married, I would rather go and fight the war than send my wife. Like, I mean, this is where a man's desire for his family is to protect his loved ones. And why would a man want to send his wife out to war and let himself sit home? I can't understand that thinking. I just can't. Like, even if she wanted to go, I would be like, why? I'll go. I'm better suited to go. Stay here. I'm not as good with the kids. I'm not.
Well, and in the case of what's her name? My brain's gone dead on that woman. He comes, she like lures him into the house. I mean, he's there, like he comes to her basically, but she takes care of it.
Well, not saying that women can't protect themselves, but like, I mean, it's as a man, like, why would you want to send your wife out to war and you stay home? Like,
no, I mean, I agree. I'm not.
I agree. I actually agree as well. For the most part, I think there are always outliers. I do know a couple of outliers, like, not the norm, not the average, not most women. Like, everybody knows, like, a woman who's very strong or a man who's very weak. There might be an outlier there.
But it's the same way that I would not want my daughters playing in sports with men.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys. First, the funny question: "I'll fight you naked for $2." Says, "Okay, if we're fighting, who's fighting with me?" No, we're not. By the way, we're not fighting. That was a poor choice of words. We were having an argument, and I was wanting to make sure everybody was cool, and they are. It's me that's not cool. But nobody wants to fight with you because you're naked. This is the question from Frank Blaskowitz. Says, what tactics should be employed to someone who is tempted into a dangerous ideology?
I would say you got to pray to God about that, because every situation is different. And I mean, our natural tendency, especially say if it's a loved one, you want to go overboard to protect them. And sometimes we do that. And so I would say you got to talk to God on that one, get counsel. I mean, because each situation is different, right? And ask God to guide you.
When I have had friends who are in a dangerous ideology, most of the time it's been people who have already been in it for a while, like I was, like in the woke left. So it's not so much that they're being tempted by it now, it's that they've already been tempted. They've already fallen into this belief system. And the best advice I could give is try not to try not to be the one who closes the door. Like, a lot of times they're going to close the door on you if they're in a cult-like ideology. But I try not to be the one who closes the door if they haven't done so, because like and this isn't always the case. Sometimes I completely fail. I take the bait if they're being nasty to me or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, done. I don't need you around. But for the most part, I tried. I've got a couple friends who are in the woke left still. And one of them will say very rude and insulting things to me. He's not a believer, but he thinks I'm extremely homophobic and transphobic and all that stuff. And he's like, I can't wait for you to die and go to heaven and find out your God's not real. And, he says stuff like that. Yes. But I still haven't shut the door on him, because I feel like in his case he's still curious. He's always contacting me, wants to know things about what I believe. And so I'm like, he hasn't unfriended me on social media yet. I'm not going to unfriend him. I guess it's up to you. I would also, don't take abuse from people, but you kind of have, like you said, it's a case-by-case basis. Maybe that wasn't a good example. They're not all that nasty.
Well, it's a lot like the TDS stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't know, Frank, I don't know your like beliefs, but I would just say it would be the same way we as Christians would treat someone that is, maybe they went into a lifestyle that you don't approve of. Like, you're still going to be loving, you're still going to leave the door open, as Keri said. You're just not going to necessarily agree with them.
Yeah. Well, and you have to
point out objective truth.
Yes, and
where it can be found.
You have to remember that it's God that changes the hearts, not us. And that's, I guess, the
Yes.
fundamental principle to understand, because if you start hammering somebody over the head, they will become defensive. And
Yes.
so it's be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove, and let God lead you in all your paths. That's really all that is to it. Do a lot of praying for guidance.
Yeah, there's a reason a whole bunch of people were called Bible thumpers back in the day.
Yes.
Don't hear the term as much, but yeah, thumping people over the head with the Bible isn't always the most effective way to get through to them.
Yes. Yeah, that I find all that to be so true. Like, it's God that's going to work on people, and you're like a vessel for God, but he doesn't need you to be a used car salesman. You know, that's kind of the way I view it. Like, I don't need to put fancy bells and whistles, or, you know, like you said, beat people over the head with it. People in my life know I'm a believer because I just kind of can't help but view everything through my world, through my faith. Like, of course I do. So it comes out.
Well, and that's kind of the funny thing is we're expected to often not believe things through our lens of faith, but everybody has some lens that they're looking at everything through. And especially those who don't have a lens of faith, you know, really don't like it when you look at things through a lens of faith, but they're allowed to look through their lens, and no matter what. So
yes,
be aware of it.
One thing I wanted to add is that when we look at somebody that's doing something that's wrong, we have to remember that we also do things that are wrong, and that our sin, we deserve to die. So whatever our sin is no different than that other person's sin, regardless of whether it's, you know, stealing a cookie or you killed someone. At the end of the day, you're still going to get death, right? Like, so you needed God's grace. And so you have to look at that person as someone who is a fellow sinner who needs God, and remember the mercy that God gives you.
yes,
We should give other people, and not be so quick to be harsh and judgmental, because some things offend us more than others. But remember that all sin is offensive to God, because what is it? Like, basically, when they ate the fruit, that was like a kid taking a cookie from the cookie jar that you said no, and that cost Jesus his life, right?
Yep.
Should put it in perspective.
You guys can keep going. I didn't realize it got so late. I've got to have my daughter at her choir concert in the next 15 minutes, so I got to get going.
You go ahead, Brahma Bull. Thank you for being here. You guys check out Brahma's channel.
See you, Brahma.
See you later.
Bye.
Catch you on the bullpen Sunday. Later.
Bye.
See you.
We should wrap it up. We've gone longer than we usually do anyway. I've really appreciated this conversation. I really appreciate listening to you guys debate. And Dale, thank you for coming on again.
Yes.
We do have a sponsorship chat here from Pucarella and Napping Natalie from $1.99, and they say that super chat is sponsored by Diet Soda and Spit. I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
Okay, I thought you would know.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Michelle, tell people where they can find you. But by the way, I mentioned you today. I got to interview someone for my show. I've got an interview coming out with Lucas Curcio. Am I saying it right?
Oh yeah.
And he mentioned you, and I just so I thought of you today because I was saying you're one of my favorite people online. You and your sister have a hilarious channel of response videos. Tell people where they can find you and what you're up to.
Yes, you can find me and my sister at Forcify Entertainment. We actually just put out our first time watching reaction. Well, we did Tombstone, which was great, but also Firefly, which I'm enjoying because it's like shocking that they have like a legit Christian character in it, which is good. But yeah, so go check out my sister and I at Forcify Entertainment for reactions and reviews.
Was that sci-fi? Was that a sci-fi movie? Okay. I was just okay. First thought came those little phones that they had for the kids, but I'm like, they're not talking about that, and I'm like, okay, it must be the sci-fi thing.
It's
Yeah,
Josh
you got it.
Simpson,
You got
right?
it. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But it was good. Or thus far.
What's going on with you, Dale? Where can people find you?
You can find me at DJS Richardson on X, Getter and Truth. I'm also on Facebook, Dale Richardson. Doing the podcast, the Cares Project, with my daughter, and I actually do. I'm doing a podcast with a lady in Texas. She's a former sex worker that's now a Christian, and she does counseling and so forth. And we talk about a lot of different topics of people that were in bad situations and now are trying to find their way back to God and how to kind of deal with some of that stuff. So, yeah, it's kind of
I
good.
love that.
It's divergent discussions. You can follow it on.
Divergent discussions. Very
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys both for being here. Thank you to the chat. Thank you for your comments, your disagreements, and for tuning in. And I just really appreciate you guys. So have a good night. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Well, take care.